Hello, it's a beautiful day in late February. Welcome to Bushcraft Basics. Now in this episode, I'm hoping to show you some methods for tapping birch trees for their sap in order to then make syrup. It's the 25th of February now, and we've had quite a cold February so far, and then lots of high winds and rain. This is the first day since the temperature started to change and get warmer that it's been nice enough to go out and really see if we can tap those trees. But the first thing we need to do before we start drilling into trees or causing any unnecessary harm to the tree is to find out whether the sap is flowing. So to do that, I need to find a birch with a nice side branch that I can cut and test that with. Here's a good candidate for testing whether the sap is rising sufficiently or not. You want a good healthy branch. We don't want to cut into the main stem unnecessarily. Now 3 days ago I was reliably told that the sap of the birch is flowing well down in Derbyshire. But here in Wales we're a little further north and a little higher up. So let's see what we've got here. Folding saw, always a handy thing to have out and about. I'm going to cut it on a bit of a slope, so any drip is going to come down to the base there. The other advantage to cutting the branch at a slope like this away from the tree is that we're encouraging any rainwater to hit this and flow away and not go towards the trunk, so we're discouraging rot. It's good practice. Well, it's been about a minute and there's nothing coming from this at the minute, but that doesn't mean the sap isn't flowing on site here. It could just be the wrong tree. So let's try some others. The first birch I cut there was in the middle of the woods. Now I've come to an area that I'm hoping I'm going to have a bit more success with. It's a much more open space. The birch tree behind me here has got a lot of sunlight and space to grow with lots more side branches. So I'm hoping that the sap is rising much more with that one. So fingers crossed. Here we go folks, I've just cut this one on a much larger tree and look at that straight away. As soon as I cut it, steady drips. That's exactly what we want to see. Now a good flow should be every 4 seconds, but this is doing very well. So if we count 1, 2, 3, 4. So in 4 seconds we're getting 2 drips. So that's really good. So let's get on with harvesting this. Now the first method we're going to use for collection is the most simple. I'm just going to use the billy can here, but you could use an old fizzy drinks bottle. That would work perfectly fine as well. And I'm going to need something to stop the flies getting into the sugary sap. So I've got this little muslin cloth with me, which is going to go hopefully over the top of the can here. I'm going to have to go handheld here folks, so I can get the camera high enough so you can see what I've done. Here's the billy can secured. You can also see I've secured the muslin in here with a bit of string just in case the wind catches it to help it from blowing off. And actually I've cut this branch in such a way that it acts as a stop to stop the handle from slipping down at all. And especially we have to think of that when it's going to hopefully be full of liquid. It's going to weigh a lot more. And then just to stop it being taken away, I've just secured it, a bit of belt and braces with a bit of string here on this branch. You might not need that, but I want to make sure this isn't going to blow away in the night. Well, I'm very happy with that folks. A nice and simple method, and the sap is flowing well. So let's try a couple of other ways of harvesting the sap. Now I've come over to a different tree. It's in the same field, still getting a lot of sun with a lot of space to grow. So I hope the sap is pumping up just under the bark. But I don't want to tap the same tree with 2 methods, just one for each tree to minimize the impact. But what we're going to do with this one is drill into the main stem, the main trunk of the tree. And that is a classic birch tapping method. Of course, it does have a bit more impact, so we need to look carefully at how we can minimize the impact and repair the tree afterwards so it's got a good chance to seal over the wound we're going to make. Now for this method, we're going to need a little bit more kit. I've got a container here for collecting our sap. Make sure that's cleaned out beforehand. I've picked quite a large one because I'm feeling quite optimistic about this. We've got a hose as well, again making sure it's clean to go between our hole and the container. I've got a brace and bit with a flathead drill bit to make our hole, And lastly, I've got a J-cloth, which is just going to be stuffed in the gap between the hose and the container to stop the bugs getting in. Here's the hole, and I've gone in about 1 centimetre in depth, and already we can see a wet glistening. We've got sap dripping down. Of course we need to capture that, so let's insert the hose. But first we're just going to have to check if the hose is a good fit, or whether I'm going to have to use a slightly larger drill bit that I have here in order to make the hose fit nice and snug. Right, let's try the hose. Well, that seems to fit pretty well. I'm happy with that, looking good. And here we have method 2 all ready to go, to be left and hopefully to collect lots of sap for us, fingers crossed. A couple of things I've done here, just so you can see. This container is a bit unstable, it's quite narrow, so I put a couple of logs here to secure it. There's no point in us collecting it and then it's spilling over in a bit of wind. So if you haven't got any kind of logs to hand, maybe just use a wider bottom container. Secondly, I do have one concern, and that's that I can see quite a lot of the sap below the hole, below the pipe here, running down the outside of the trunk. Now that might have been from when I initially tapped it, or it might be that we're losing it out of the hose, it's not going down. Only time will really tell. So we'll see how that goes. I'm hoping it's going to collect a lot. Fingers crossed. I mean, that's what it's all about, isn't it? Trying things out and seeing what works. This last method is one I've not tried myself before, but I got it on good advice from James Dunlop at Wild Time Outdoors. So thanks James for this one. We're going to give it a go now. And what you need is some hose again, you're going to need a saw, and you're going to need a container of course to collect your liquid. What we're looking for in a tree this time is some side branches, and specifically side branches of a certain diameter, just about the same diameter as our hose, because what we're going to do is fit the hose over the branch to capture all the sap, and that'll go down into the container. So let's try that out. Okay, this is about the best candidate that I've found for this method. I do have one concern though, it's not as mature, as thick a tree as I would like. The other two that we've tapped are a lot older, so of course there's a lot more sap going through them. So my concern is, are we going to get as much off this? But we learn by doing, don't we? What it does have is a couple of good side branches, which are about the right diameter, as you can see if I put the hose against the branch here. But I picked this one also for another reason. This branch is dead, so it's going to be no good to us whatsoever. Make sure you check the far end of the branches, whether you're using this method or the first method where we sawed a branch. Make sure it's a living branch. And this one above it, although a little thicker, will have to be whittled down, is living, and this is going to yield hopefully something good for us. No, there's nothing coming from this at all, nothing like the immediate drips we had from that first branch. That's a shame. Now, as that last tree didn't work, I've come to a totally different tree, and this one's going to be perfect. And also, I've managed to get a much better container to collect the sap in as well. And also notice that this side branch is also going down slightly, so all the liquid is coming down the pipe. That's just a short end I've put on for now, but already we can see there's a nice steady drip coming out of there about every 5 seconds. What I'm going to do now is fit a longer hose and the rest of the setup. And here it is all set up, ready to go to be left overnight. You can see that the container here has the hose coming straight into it, tied around a bit of J-cloth just to stop the bugs getting in, and the whole bottle is securely tied to a branch above the one that I'm tapping from. And there's enough slack there that as it increases in weight, as hopefully it fills up, it's not going to become distorted and come under strain. And already I can see there's a nice amount of sap in the very bottom of the container, and I've only been here a few minutes. So this is looking really promising. I can't wait to come back tomorrow and see what we've got. So here's our first setup, and it's good to see it's still dripping steadily, although the drips have slowed down to 1 every 8 seconds. We started off with 1 every 2, then when I left site yesterday it was down to 1 every 4, and now it's slowed down again. But it's still steady, so there's still stuff to come out of this tree. And even better news, there's a lot of weight in this. This is almost full. That's fantastic. Just overnight there, it's filled this whole billy can. So in a real survival situation where you needed fresh water that you knew was clean, you could harvest this because it's been filtered by the roots and by the tree system there, and it's totally safe and clean to drink. But of course, it's not going to give you an immediate water supply. You have to plan this, and you're going to have to wait overnight before you can get a really good drink. Can't resist giving this a little taste first. It tastes like fresh spring water with a hint of sweetness to it. It's lovely and cool. It's really nice, that. Just like the best spring water you've ever tasted, but as I said, with that little bit of sweetness. Yeah, good stuff. So what I'll do now is empty this container and take that sap away, ready to be boiled down for syrup, and we'll just set this up again for another night and see how it does tomorrow. And now I'm back at our second setup where we tapped right into the trunk. Now, logic dictates that this should be fuller because we're going right into the trunk itself, and it was having a real steady rate of flow here. And I took the hose out, and that steady flow was continuing, more so than it was on our first branch. However, inside our container here was only a good cupful of sap. So what's going on? Well, I've had a little look at this and tested my theory, and what's happening is a fair bit of the sap is escaping out of the bottom of the hole and not going down the pipe. So that's not working so well. We need a better seal around the pipe to get the liquid to go where we want it to go. I can see that drip down here now. I don't have anything with me to seal that hole, but if I could get hold of it, maybe some pine or spruce resin could be warmed up in my hands and squashed in there. Maybe that could work well. I don't have anything with me, so what I'm gonna have to do is come back tomorrow and fix it then. So for now, I've put it back. We're gonna collect what we can, even though we've got a bit of an inefficient drip, and we'll see if we can make a better seal tomorrow and then test it for another night. So we'll see you back here then. Here I am back on day 3 at the birch tree where we're tapping straight into the trunk, and you'll be able to see right away that I've made a bit of a modification here. Now, I'm not going to win any bushcraft points for this because I wanted to use something like spruce or pine resin warmed up and then used as a sealant round here, but I didn't have any to hand, and instead I've gone to the garage and I found some Plumber's Mate, which is an artificial sealer. But even though it's not something that's natural, it's going to answer the question as to whether with an improved seal we're going to harvest more of the sap. So I've emptied the container, so whatever we get now is with this new seal round here. But let's see what happens, because certainly it's still coming out. I took the hose out a minute ago and we're still getting a good drip on this tree, so there's still sap to be harvested. We'll come back tomorrow and we'll see what happens. It's been a couple of days since I last filmed at this one. I was back yesterday, but I've left it an extra night. And the reason for that is because when I came back yesterday, the little branch had actually stopped dripping and giving us any more sap. So either the wound is closed up, or for whatever reason it's just decided to stop giving us the sap there. So the lesson is to make sure you go back and regularly check the trees that you're tapping, because some of them might well dry up. So after that one night, what have we got? Well, we've got a good cupful of sap, nowhere near as much as I would have hoped from here, because the advantage with this method here is that we're not getting any leakage at all like we got with the hose tapped straight into the trunk there. And although this method is good, the only thing I'd say, it's been a bit finicky trying to find the right birch tree. A lot of the side branches that we want that aren't dead are higher up the tree. A lot of the lower ones are dead, and of course that's not going to yield any sap. So you have to find a birch tree that's of a good size, with a side branch you can reach, and that side branch has got to be the right diameter for the hose to fit over as well. So there's quite a few factors at play there. So although this works well, although unfortunately this one has stopped dripping. I think I prefer the method where you just have the can under the twig. It's the most simple, and you've got more options to find a branch that's suitable because you're not depending on a branch of a particular diameter. I'm not going to leave this for another night now as it's stopped dripping, so I'm going to take it down, collect what we've got and go and check the other ones. We're back for day 3, and I'm sure you're wanting to know whether the putty here actually made any difference. Well, I've had a quick look, and there is a bit of a drip coming out from under the putty, so it hasn't sealed it completely. But if I be careful not to disturb it too much, because we're going to put this back on if it's worked. And yeah, there's a lot more sap, at least twice what we had the first time round, so that's definitely been worth doing. So here you can see everything that I've managed to gather today. This is everything from the billy can method and the method with the hose straight into the trunk of the birch. So that's what we've collected overnight. Now we're going to leave it one more night to get as much as we can and take advantage of this lovely warm spell that we're having. So we'll see you tomorrow. It's the end of day 4 now, and the drips have slowed right down here, down to 1 every 15 or 16 seconds. So it feels right to take this away and make good. Now, in order to leave this wound with the best chance of healing over nicely, I'm going to use my little folding pocket saw I've got here, and we're going to make a clean cut with the saw right at the top of the collar. And the collar is a little kind of natural ring that you can see between the trunk and the branch, where it's just slightly raised the wood. So we're going to saw it off just at the front of that collar and leave a nice clean cut that can heal over. So I'm back at our main tap for the last time, and I noticed that when I came now we didn't have any drips leaking from around the putty. I thought, great, that means all the sap has gone into the can. But actually, when I went to collect it, there was hardly any in there, maybe half a cup. So what looks like has happened, as I'll see when I take this off, is that it stopped giving sap. And that's fine, it's a natural time to stop. What I want to do is make good on this. But in order to do that, because it's a more significant wound than just cutting off a side branch, we need to take a bit more care to make sure we sealed it and given the tree the best chance of healing over. As I suspected, there's no drips at all coming from there. This hole is completely dried up, which to be honest, I'm quite surprised at. But I guess, again, it goes back to that lesson that we learned the other day. Have a few different taps on the go, don't just rely on one. So in order to minimise our impact here, we're going to have to plug the hole nicely. And what I've done is cut a piece of birch, which is just a little bit bigger than the hole, an old branch that I found hanging around, but not rotten. And then we're just going to whittle the end of it with a little bevel end, just so it fits in snugly. There's another step I'm going to use here as well before the plug goes in, and that's to put in a little bit of birch oil into the hole just to help seal it. Now this is my own idea, it's not a method that I've read anywhere else or heard of anyone else doing in order to plug the gap when they've tapped a birch tree, but this birch oil has all the goodness of the birch tree, and this was made a couple of years ago by putting a lot of birch bark in a closed tin in a fire, like you would if you were making artist charcoal, and then from that burn, drawing out the oil that was left over, the natural oil that is drawn out of the bark. So I'm hoping that this will do a nice job of sealing the wound and putting some of that goodness back into the birch tree. And because this oil is made completely from birch trees, we're not adding in any kind of substance that doesn't belong there. But this isn't something I'm saying you have to do, it's something that I'm just trying out because I've got the oil to hand, but certainly it's not something I've read having been done anywhere else. Most people just plug up the hole with a bit of wood. So I'm going on instinct here, and it just feels like the right thing to do, so why not? Remember, the hole is only about 1 centimetre deep, so we don't need much at all. And we'll keep whittling it until it's the right diameter and it fits in snugly. We'll tap it in, and then I'm going to saw it off so it's nice and neat and the tree will heal. And by using the birch wood itself, I'm not putting anything foreign into the tree at all. now, and it's time to talk about how we get the sap to turn into syrup. So this is how I did it. I put the sap in a large pan, but I didn't put it all in at once, and that's important. And we're going to simmer that sap down. We're boiling away the water. We want to reduce it down and concentrate those sugars. But what I want to do is make sure it doesn't burn out too quickly, because when the liquid gets to the bottom and it's really concentrated, there's a danger that it could burn out and you're going to ruin your syrup. So firstly, you need to take your time with it. Don't boil it very hard, just simmer it over several hours. The more sap you've got, the longer of course it's going to take to reduce down. And as I said, I kept some of the sap back, so the liquid that was in the pan kept being topped up every now and then, and over time, slowly, that liquid was getting more and more concentrated with those sugars. And as those sugars concentrate, you're going to get a beautiful, warm, rich brown colour to your syrup. So keep testing it every now and then, having a little taste. When you think it's ready, you just need to take it off the heat. Now I bet you're wondering, well, where's the fruit of all my labours? Well, here it is. This is all the birch syrup that I've managed to get from all the sap that I collected. It doesn't seem like a lot for all the effort, does it? But that makes it very precious. I didn't get an exact measurement of how much sap I collected. I'd estimate it was about 2 of those large fizzy drinks bottles, and then reduced down, this is what we've got. So it gives you an idea of the kind of amount of sap you're going to need in order to get much more syrup in return. In terms of its consistency, it's not as thick as maple syrup, but it is darker in colour. Now, do I think it's worth all that effort? Well, yeah, I do really, because even though there's not a lot of it, what we do have is excellent quality. This is really lovely stuff. And to give you an equivalent of what it tastes like, I was trying to put my finger on it, and it tastes like the sauce in a creme caramel that you would buy in a shop. Exactly like that, a slightly burnt quality to it. And I may only have enough for a couple of pancakes, but I will enjoy them very much. So, that's all my adventures of making birch syrup this year. It's certainly something I'm going to try again next year, now armed with a bit more knowledge and experience, so I'm looking forward to that. And I'm looking forward to also hearing about how you've tapped birch syrup and how you've got on with it. So good luck.